I think it's important to note, like, I mean, as far as like recognizing yourself, because I can hear you. I'm not talented at just about anything that I do, but it's like anything you put effort towards, anybody can be, can
Yeah.
become good at it if you put in the effort. And it's like, I just, from again, the outside looking in, then hearing you talk and like as how much effort you put into your bow setups and your arrow builds and all the things you're doing, it's like you're building these things up to make sure that they go right or have the least chance of going wrong, essentially, because you're
Yeah.
preparing for that.
I love how you put that. Yeah, it's all yeah, lots of effort. Nothing, doesn't come naturally. And I love how you said I'm stacking the deck in my favor on my hunts with all of my preparation. So I'm huge on preparation, bow preparation, making the right phone calls before your hunt, making sure that, well, you'll get a kick out of this, a little bit of a side tangent. I got to a hunt one time in Idaho and there had been a burn. The fire had been burned out. And out of this one main trailhead, you could go like three different directions, right? You wouldn't believe the number of people, hunters, who logged into the trail book saying that they were going to the exact drainage that 2 weeks ago had just burned the whole thing down. And I was just like, oh my word. That is like, I could, and then the funny thing was, is like we checked the logbook kind of just joking with ourselves, like half those people had come out and like had put a note in the logbook, like didn't know there was a fire or something. And I was just like, could you imagine spending the
Oh,
first 3 days of your hunt just going like hiking 5, 6 miles into this drainage, and then you're like, oh, it's burnt, and then you're like, oh snap, I guess we'll leave and go somewhere else.
yeah.
So like, yeah, making the right calls. One time I got bit in the butt. We were driving to Colorado and we had to go through this like kind of rural area, and dumb me didn't check. And Google isn't the best at, really rural areas and road conditions. Well, guess what? There was a road closure and we missed it by an hour. So we had to sleep. And did that was just last year.
Really?
So yeah, so there's just always stuff that you have to that bit me. So we literally slept at the road closure until they opened it up at 6 a.m. So it's just constantly learning. It's just a constant battle of uh, recapping what went well and what went wrong. After the season, what went well, what went wrong, figuring it out, making mental notes. And what I'm trying to do in Western Hunter is I'm trying to like prepare people for the shit that I've gone through so that they don't have to do it. And a lot of it's on the preparation end. The bow stuff, I'm a huge believer in like what you said, making your bow the most efficient for your exact hunt. Not I love the guy and he has great advice. Not what necessarily what Aaron Snyder says or not what so and so says. Like I preach two completely different arrow philosophies depending on what you're hunting, right? Like if you're hunting open country mule deer, that I'll put the blanket statement out here. This assumes that you have enough energy, right? That you've got a decent draw length, you're pulling 70 pounds, that energy isn't an issue. But my whole thought process is like preparing bow wise. Well, I want to optimize the best chance that I have of killing an animal. So there's like an arrow design and a bow design that can help me achieve that goal. And on open country hunts, in my opinion, based off of the shit that I've dealt with and mistakes that I've made, is ranging errors, right? Like most people, myself included, the errors that you make in open country hunts are ranging errors. Like you just get a misrange, even with a rangefinder. Sometimes you think you know it, you guess at the range, and it's wrong, or you use a rangefinder and range beyond it, or you hit some grass in front of it. Like you've been to Total Archery Challenge. How many times on some of those shots did you have to click your
Yeah.
rangefinder and actually get the right range, right? So range forgiveness is the most important thing in my mind on open country mule deer hunts, for example. So what that means is I want an arrow with a trajectory that's very flat so it doesn't arc a lot as it's flying. What that means is at 80 yards, I'll just use 80 yards as an example. If you range something at 80 yards, well, let's say it's 82 yards. Well, with a slower arrow, with a with a slower, higher profile trajectory, you're if it's really 82 and you aim for 80, you're going to miss. You're going to be out of the kill zone. You may wound them, right? So I preach this thing called range forgiveness at 80 yards. So with every one of my setups, I want to know how far off on a range I can be at 80 yards and still hit the kill or be in the kill zone, right? For a mature mule deer, I figure is like 10 inches. So I've got plus or minus 5 inches. And on my fast arrow setup, the one that's optimized for open country hunting, I can be 3 yards off at 80 and still be in the kill zone. That's monumental, right?
Yeah.
If I would have known this 10, 15 years ago, I think back on the animals where I just shot just underneath it. Well, to go from shooting just underneath to clipping the heart, killing an animal is like 2 inches. So 3 inches, right? So if I would have known this stuff like 15 years ago, I would have killed some pretty damn good deer. In fact, one 180 class mule deer I have in mind right now. Then you contrast that with so guys in the Pacific Northwest hunting rosies, or guys in northern Idaho hunting Rocky Mountain elk, but really dense timber. Some places in Wyoming have really dense timber. Guys out east. I don't mean to like tromp on the eastern subject so much, but ambush hunting, water hunting. I take the exact opposite approach. Like, unless you're hunting like a cornfield and you may expect like a 60, 70 yard shot across the cornfield, in that particular instance, I'd probably want a light fast arrow so I could be off on the range. But like any other close quarter situations, I like an ultra heavy arrow, because what I've learned based off of my experience sitting water and ambush hunting, which I've done a fair amount of, I do not want to wait for an ideal broadside shot because the wind can swirl. You want to minimize your time in the red zone. So for me, short range situations, thick cover, calling an elk, sitting water, sitting tree stands, all of that stuff, I want shot angle forgiveness. And how you get shot angle forgiveness is momentum. Momentum is probably the single most important factor for penetration, especially on heavy bone impact. So I like a really heavy arrow in short range situations, so that I can, if I need to take a slightly quartering two shot and I catch the edge of the scapula, it's going to penetrate, right?
Yep.
So that those sort of things, like I get down to that sort of detail in my preparation because I truly feel that stacking the deck in your favor and more or less over preparing for hunts is the reason why I've been fairly successful.
No, I mean, I think that makes a whole lot of sense, and it's a very practical approach to it because, like you look at someone like me that has a shorter draw length, 27.5 inch draw, I shoot an ultra heavy arrow and I start shooting long ranges. You're off by a couple of yards. You're completely missing.
You're done.
You're completely done, and this, or even just like when we were in Big Sky shooting Total Archery Challenge, we were in the timber, but shooting long distances like TAC is all about, it seems like. I remember I was shooting next to John Dudley and I was like, I don't think I'm going to hit that branch. It's over top of it. And he's like, oh, you're good. In his mind, and which I found out later, he knew I was going to hit it with my arrow setup. And I smashed that branch because it was so much arc at that distance with the arrow that I was shooting, being a little bit, and it's not like ultra heavy or anything, but with my short draw length, it adds a little bit to it. So it just makes a whole lot of sense. And like for me, I am absolutely terrible at judging range without a rangefinder in open country. I've learned that. I know I'm just terrible with it. I'm used to hunting whitetails in thick woods. I'm setting up in a tree for 15 to 25 yard shots most of the time. It's completely different game than when you go out west or if you're hunting ag country for whitetails and stuff like that. So